Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Focus on Friday. Tonight, the one that I'm going to talk about hits close to home for me personally because as a gay man who is also a Jew, I have family that survived the Holocaust, and that's why I'm here today. And tonight's person that I'm going to discuss is Pierre Seel, who was a Holocaust survivor, and he was put into the concentration camps because of the fact that he was gay. Pierre was born in August of 1923, and he started out in an affluent Catholic family, born in his own castle in Hennegau. His father was a successful patisserie and coffee shop his mother was a store manager who ended up joining the family business, and things were fine for a while. In 1939, Pierre was cruising through a public park looking for a sexual hookup, and he was robbed. And during that robbery, he reported the theft to the police, and unbeknownst to him at the time, they put him on the homosexual registry, and that was what would lead him to being arrested and interred. On May 3rd of 1941, in fact, he was arrested. He was tortured and raped with a piece of wood and then sent to the county jail before being transferred to the Schermeck-Wulbrook camp, about 30 kilometers west of Strasbourg. His uniform wasn't marked with the pink triangle that most homosexuals were because that specific camp didn't use that one. Instead, they used the blue bar marking him as a Catholic antisocial person, which had the same connotation. In fact, he would remark later on that even within the prisoners, the hierarchy of such were that the homosexuals that were there were treated as the lowest of low. And in fact, he would develop a nearly lifelong fear of dogs during that time as he watched his lover, who was arrested with him, get attacked and killed by a pack of German police dogs, and nobody would help them because of the fact that they were homosexuals. In November of 1941, after months of starvation and ill treatment, he was set free with absolutely no explanation, but then was conscripted by the German army, and that began his unwilling military career. He ended up as an aide-de-camp to a German officer. He ended up at a military airport near the Dutch-German border at one point. He was incorporated into the Wehrmacht to become one of the Malgré-nous, despite ourselves, which were French-German nationalists who were forced to fight against their own people. And this just kept going on. His military career was a bizarre one. In 1943, he was sent to Lesbenborn as part of Heinrich Himmler's breeding protocols to create a better pure Aryan race. He was there for 3 days until they realized who they had recruited there. And then towards the end of summer of 1943, he was put back into the more administrative duties. He became a teller on a train for soldiers passing through in, I believe, Salonika and Belgrade. And then during the unraveling of the Third Reich towards the end, he tried to get away a few times. In fact, actually defecting with a German army officer that ended terribly. They brought him back, and then he accidentally let a horse go and was sent out again, and the Russian troops picked him up and were actually going to shoot him until he started singing in French, the French national anthem, and they ended up recruiting him to help other Nazi survivors go back to where they came from, but it would take 3 more years. Finally, he would get back to France, and towards almost 1950. At the end of the war in France, Charles de Gaulle's government did end up repealing the anti-Semitic laws, but they didn't do anything about the homosexual laws. And that really hurt him. So he ended up being very confused and very closeted about himself, and he would end up marrying a woman through an arranged marriage and having kids, but he was never close to the kids because he was always afraid that if he showed compassion towards his boys, that would be taken wrong. So that was a huge strain for them growing up. It really wasn't until 1978, when his marriage was falling apart from the strain of constantly moving around for his work and the fact that he was gay, that he was working in Paris at the time and came across a French edition of Heinz Henglinger's The Men in the Pink Triangle, which is an accounting of the homosexuals in the concentration camps and their experiences. And from that, he was inspired to come out, and he would eventually become a public speaker about being gay during the Nazi regime and the Nazis and their issues. In 1981, he helped publish an anti-gay declaration, which made him publicly targeted, and people would commit death threats against him. He was beaten up a couple times for being himself about that, but he never backed down. In 1994, he published his book, Moi, Pierre Seel, Déporté homosexuel, and just brought everything to light and became a huge advocate for the lost and forgotten within World War II that were put in the concentration camps, specifically the homosexuals. And they would have a happy ending. The last 12 years of his life, he had a stable partner who was a dog trainer and helped him get over his fear of dogs. And he would go on to continue to be an advocate. And if you're still watching after this time, because this is a particularly long one, he is a remarkable man because he never gave up, and he never allowed the atrocities to fully overshadow his life, eventually becoming a strong advocate against that, so it was never forgotten. And that is just one more person that no one ever talks about that we all should. Y'all have a good night.